So you are applying into medical school or you have been accepted as a student into medical school. Congratulations. You are now among an elite class of human beings. I'm very proud of you. You should be very proud of yourself. But there are certain things that you need to keep in mind when you arrive at this level. At this point, it's game time. It is do or die. This is what you have been working toward. This is what you've been waiting for. This is not the time to sit back and relax and just let life happen to you. There are certain things that you need to prioritize in order to have the most success possible. Think of the big picture. What are you even in medical school for? Why are you here? Why are you pursuing this goal? The goal is to become a doctor, obviously. So then the big question becomes, which type do you want to become? That is your biggest priority in medical school. Obviously, besides academics, besides getting the good grades, getting the good test scores, that's going to open the doors for you. Definitely keep that as number one. But the primary focus that you should be having is figuring out what you want to do with the time that you're spending. You're not just in medical school, okay? You are in medical school to train to become a doctor. Now, what you should be thinking of is which type of doctor will you eventually become? This is a question that is a big looming question over every single medical student's head. Everybody at some point will have to make a decision when they submit their residency applications, and even before that, when they are asking for their letters of recommendation or maybe even deciding research opportunities. This is a huge question that I find that I would say the majority of medical students definitely underestimate. The typical medical student will wait until their third year in medical school before they start to begin the journey of finding out what it is they want to do with the rest of their lives. And while that's okay, while, like I said, most people do that, most people are successful with that, I think in order to reach heights that you really want to reach or break through those barriers that you want to break through and even limit the amount of anxiety you have during medical school, figuring out that question and making that question a priority will honestly catapult you levels ahead of almost your entire class. So what I would recommend for you guys for the key to success in medical school and what should be your first priority is making sure you know what you want to do. At least have a top 2, at most a top 3, okay? If you can narrow it down to a top 2 or a top 3, you can start reaching out and making connections in those directions. That way you will be able to have substantial progress. So when it comes time 2-3 years later, when you are applying into residency, you have all this work to show for it. In a book that I just read called Essentialism, there is a concept of making a millimeter of progress in every direction or making a mile of progress in 1, 2, or 3 directions. So you can see that if you limit your focus, that allows you to make substantial progress in just a singular direction. For most medical schools, there is no shortage of opportunities to get involved. You might be extending your time in several different directions, but not necessarily making very much progress in any direction. Imagine you have a top 2 or a top 3, and for 2 or 3 years, you are working to solidify your position in those departments. So let's say your top 3 are general surgery, plastic surgery, radiology. If you could narrow it down to those specialties, you can start to make connections. You can go to these interest group meetings or conferences that have to do with that particular specialty. You can start to meet physicians in that department, make those connections. And if you continuously show up on these individuals' radar, they're gonna start to see a pattern. They're like, okay, I've seen Kai at our grand rounds a couple times over the past 2 years. He must have a genuine interest, versus not making that decision, not showing up in those departments, not particularly being very active as a participant at these conferences, at these interest group meetings, because you don't really know if this is what you want to do, so you don't commit. Nobody's going to notice you. Nobody's going to think that you're interested. Nobody's going to keep you in mind or be inclined to help you. But if they continue to see you, if you become a pattern, if you become an individual that continuously shows up, continuously is there poking their head in, interacting with people, making connections, setting up meetings, people are going to notice that. People are going to want to help you. So now that you have done that, now that you have chosen your top 3, started to show up to these meetings, started to show up to these conferences, you need to follow up. So what you guys need to do once you have hammered down your choices is to try to identify mentors. This definitely is going to be a time commitment. I'm not saying that this is going to happen automatically or that this is going to be easy. Definitely going to be a time commitment, but that's where the priority comes in. Make this a high priority because it's worth spending your time on making these connections. Now I'm going to do another video later on how to best establish connections and how to best network with physicians and how to best acquire a mentor. So you can look forward to that later. But right now, understand that should be something that you put your time towards. Find out which specialties you want, make that top 2, top 3 list, start reaching out, start volunteering, start making these connections, start showing your face so people know who you are. So when it comes time for those letters later, they have a substantial amount to say about you. If somebody can write in your letter, we noticed that Kai had been here since the first 2 years of medical school, he has shown a long-term interest. That type of statement goes a really long way versus somebody who just met you during your 3rd year clerkship and they said, was a hard worker while on his 3rd year clerkship. That doesn't necessarily show that temporal interest. That doesn't show that curiosity. You can start to see how making this a priority early will pay off in the long term. The best way to cut in half the field of opportunities is to decide, do I want to do surgery or do I want to do something non-surgical? Do I want to work with patients or do I not want to work with patients? So, your radiology, pathology people. So what type of patient population do you want to work with? Do you want to work with really sick patients and maybe do something in oncology? Or do you want to work with generally healthy patients and do something like a outpatient family medicine clinic? So, make these decisions. You can find resources online. I would recommend just Google searching how to figure out what medical specialty I want to pursue. And that'll get you a long way. There's a lot of people online who have made algorithms that you can follow to help you determine which specialty you want to go into. So like I said, you might start at the top of the algorithm, surgery, non-surgery, it takes you down different pathways. Patients, no patients, again, takes you down different pathways. And ultimately, this can help you narrow down your decision. But the point is just to get started, you need to really get started and start making that happen. Other things that you can do are shadowing and actually looking to see what clinical opportunities are available. You have so many different specialties you can choose from. Every single one of them seems so fascinating, so sexy. This seems so cool. I would love to do this. But at the end of the day, you can choose one. You can choose one. Sometimes you can combine some. Let's say you want to work with kids, but you also want to do brain surgery. You could do pediatric neurosurgery. So you can kind of combine some sometimes. But at the end of the day, you really have to choose one. That decision is not going to go away if you wait. It's only going to become harder the longer you wait. So for me personally, I narrowed it down to 2 different specialties. I spent some time figuring out what my priorities are as an individual and what my priorities will be in my career later. I would look things up. I went on Medscape. There is Medscape Physician Lifestyle Report, Medscape Physician Compensation Report. There's the AAMC Careers in Medicine website, and that does a lot to aggregate just really pertinent information for particular specialties, hours on call, hours typically at work per week, compensation, the type of cases that they do, whether the balance between surgery and medicine, if they're one of those mixed specialties like otolaryngology. Using those resources and doing a lot of Google searching, a lot of YouTube videos talking about, what is this specialty like? What's the day in the life of this kind of physician? I looked at all these resources. I looked at them often and I pondered on it. I perseverated over this information, and ultimately that led to me making a top 3 before even entering into med school. Once I got to med school, by the time my first year was over, I narrowed it down to 1. And through that, I was able to pursue the correct research opportunities. I was making appointments with every one of my mentors at least once every 4 to 6 months. And I didn't always have the most impressive updates or the most to say. during these meetings, but I wrote down questions and just continued to display my interest. And I would ask every single time, what should I be doing to continue to make myself a compelling candidate? And I could always anticipate the answer. I knew they were going to say, just pay attention to your grades, make sure that your scores are on point. That's what any mentor is going to say. That's the right thing to say. But the point is the reason I was making these appointments was to continue to show my interest, because I knew that come time for my 4th year of medical school, I would need that letter of recommendation. And guess what? Every mentor that I have, when I asked them, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? All of them were enthusiastic about it. They were like, of course, I would be happy to write you a strong letter. I'd be excited to do so. And they knew I was there. They knew I was in the right place and I wasn't just making an offhand decision. So again, big point of emphasis to you guys, your number one priority in medical school, after academics, after grades, is to figure out what you want to do with this medical education. Narrow it down to a top 3 max, and then start spending your time in those directions. And definitely keep this in mind. You can either make a millimeter of progress in every direction or a mile of progress in 1 or 2 directions. And then you can be the one to decide which one is best for you. All right, if you guys are still here, thank you so much for checking this video out. I really appreciate you guys. If you guys could subscribe to my channel, that would be awesome. I have more content coming out just like this about communication, networking, things to do in medical school, things I learned, things I would do differently. So if you guys liked my content, go ahead and like this video, leave a comment. Appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time.